Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to your amazing conference. I didn't get everything this morning, but I had such a good briefing, I felt as though I understood all the talks you had today. And I should say thank you to Jeff for setting me up so brilliantly for my talk, which was all about trial and error and making things work. I've named my talk Building Shared Lives. It's a new phrase I've been using. I think it sort of captures the kind of multicultural societies and the way we need to live in the future. We do need to have a vision, but we also need a vision that is also practical and realistic. And what I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon is all three. This is Yasha Monk. He's actually a professor of politics at Johns Hopkins University. We need to have the courage to paint the vision of a shared future that most people would actually want to live in, one in which as many people as possible conceive of themselves as proud and optimistic citizens of diverse democracies, choosing to emphasize what we have in common rather than what divides us. And his book, called The Great Experiment, actually details, we had no contact before he wrote his book, but it actually details a lot of the methods that we use and thinking about creating shared lives together. So inspiring because it builds on new models of cooperation and co-creation that have been designed by citizens themselves, and at scale this creates the inclusive, vibrant communities that we dream of. Practical because at the heart of this co-creation is simple, practical, common denominator activities that are built into every day. And that offers every single person in a community a way to have a vital part in co-creating their neighborhood. Realistic, because what I will share with you is the result of 13 years of research and development, a new way to bring life to that vision for the here and now, but also growing steadily into the future. I know that many of you will have had experiences which are very different from this vision, and I will share with you some of the methods we've used to shape a new way of building bridging social infrastructure. Many of our efforts as government to engage and include are often only attracting people with the most confidence and the most time. This is what the figures look like in the UK. Only 3% of people are involved in neighbourhood projects. 60% would like to be involved. And I think that, I don't know what the figures are in Norway, but for a very long time I've had a sense that because we're only involving a very small number of people, the assumption is that the other 97% don't care, are lazy, too busy on the internet and so on. But this research really stuck with me and made me feel that maybe we needed to redesign how participation works, and were there new ways to encourage people to participate. So rather than thinking it's the people's problem, I was thinking how can we make it our problem and do things in a different way. So what we've been asking is how to make it easy for every single person in a community to benefit from coming together through friendship and trust to make each other's lives better. We have not been asking, how do we make more people involved in delivery or co-design of specialist services? Maybe one of your questions. And we haven't been asking, how do we improve the relationship between citizens and government, even though I believe this is really important. But rather what we've been asking is how can government build the new types of social infrastructure needed to support relationships building between citizens, infrastructures that are currently missing. So that was our real question. We've been asking if the essential actions of our everyday lives can become a powerful catalyst for living differently, with more time together, with more friendship across our wonderful diversity, and in the process live more sustainably. Can we co-create shared lives, not just in our imaginations, but in real life? Because I think ultimately that this isn't a new vision. I think that we've often had this vision. I think very often politicians have had this vision of a future society that's thriving, everybody's getting on together, everyone's living sustainably. But I've called it the magic wand approach, where politicians say that this vision will come to life and then it happens. Well, it doesn't happen. And I can state to you categorically that sounds really strong, doesn't it? Categorically, that this stuff doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't burst into life spontaneously. And what we've been asking through all our projects is, what does it actually take to make this happen? So it's a challenge that the team and I have been working on for 13 years, as I said. What we've been trying to figure out is what it'll take to entice people out of their homes into their neighborhood spaces where they can meet people very different from themselves and create opportunities to build friendship and trust. So over the last 5 years, it's now maybe 6 years, we've been doing a very large research and development project in Barking and Dagenham in East London. It's a very deprived borough. It's the 19th most deprived in the UK. It has a lot of people coming in and out every year. It's got 200,000 inhabitants, and the geography is really quite big. So it's been a very challenging testing ground to see if this approach could work. And as Jeff said, you know, you have to keep trying different things all the time, iteratively, to make things work. And to figure out what it will actually take for people to come out and be together. So this is what it looks like in real life. It's colorful and joyful. It is incredible fun. It's quite stressful, but it is an amazing, amazing project, an amazing way of doing this. So our starting point was participatory culture and using that as a tool to invite people into shared spaces. It's the kind of activity that is useful to everyone and usually forms a part of everyday life, which is mostly done in our own homes. Can we do these things together? So it's hands-on activities, cooking, making, sharing, repairing, growing, and so on. Simple, straightforward activity. We did from time to time schedule sessions where people could come and talk or come and listen, and very few people turned up. But all of these practical sessions, people really do turn up. And every single activity is created with people to be radically inclusive. So people contribute by simply participating. They might host sessions. They might replicate projects. They might co-design new projects. The activities are designed specifically to foster co-creation, and it's not a service. So just as an example of the scale that we got to before COVID came from nowhere, the program that we had put together just when COVID hit, we had over 350 sessions over 8 weeks across the borough, and those were all co-created and hosted with residents. And so we really got it to work. You know, we found what that combination, that sort of secret sauce, that magic formula to actually, and it's a combination of the spaces, the facilitation, the communications. We have a newspaper that gets delivered exclusively for this kind of participation, gets delivered to all the households. So basically, we've just said, what does it take? And we just kept adding things until we started to see it working. So it's been pretty amazing. So what this involves is we've had 7 spaces, 30 team members. This picture is of what we call the warehouse, which is the largest makerspace in the UK. It's free to access, very much testing the model of whether a makerspace could be run on the same lines as a library. And it had pottery studios, fabric studios, children's mini making spaces, event spaces, you name it, digital, ceramic, everything. We've had 8,000 people, plus lots of people, this is sort of an estimate. We've also had 2,000 children participate, which was one of the most loveliest parts of the project, where to make it extra inclusive, we made sure that nearly every session parents could bring their kids, so they didn't have to find babysitters. And kids became part of the co-creation. They delivered newspapers, they welcomed people to the space, they cleaned the space. We have in our newspapers sessions, cooking sessions with 5-year-olds teaching each other how to make spaghetti. It's the sort of thing which sort of just melts your heart, really. And it was a really magical part of the project. So they also built an ecosystem of over 300 projects and spent over 60,000 hours in each other's company, which is pretty amazing. Together, these opportunities, these 60,000 hours for me was really a sort of a cohesion metric. So instead of just talking about cohesion, people were actually spending time together in the space doing social cohesion. And we managed to make that participation so inclusive and so diverse that it was really having an impact on people's relationships. So people have reported speaking to an average of 6 people from different cultures and backgrounds at every session. So imagining that 350 sessions, how many people are speaking to people who are very different from themselves? Experiencing friendship and social connection during sessions, people said 9 out of 10 sessions did that. And an increased trust of neighbours by 80%. So these things really do have an impact. And these figures I'm giving you here, these are just from the research we did for sort of direct and immediate impacts. There are a whole raft of impacts, including learning, health, mental health, and so on, environment, which we've been measuring for the impact of things, how they add up over time, over many people participating in many times. Have I gone backwards? So I'm pressing the wrong button. I knew your conference was going so smooth, I was going to do something. So would you like me to do the presentation backwards and see how we can follow along? I think it's better than I thought I'd fall off the stage, which would probably be a little bit more entertaining. So I guess one of the questions is, why is it so difficult? Why am I so proud of the fact that we've managed to find a way to bring people into spaces together? And I think that there are many reasons why meeting new and different people has become so daunting. I think one thing is clear is that the sort of them and us culture, which has been increasing in places across the world, doesn't help. But there are lots and lots of prejudice that people experience. And I think that it puts people off even taking small-looking social risks. So if you're someone who is exposed to prejudice on a regular basis, the idea of going into a space to meet people you've never met, to do something you've never done, is quite a big deal. And I think that it's not just prejudices, the more obvious ones. So it obviously includes prejudice against colour, culture, religion, class, disability, age, gender, sexual orientation, economic status. But there are also prejudices against personal struggles like homelessness or poverty or mental health or substance misuse, unemployment, literacy. These are all things which people experience prejudice and sets up a barrier, even if it's in their own mind, to take these social risks. So I think that we have to work extra hard and extra smart, thinking about how do we make these invitations as inclusive as possible. So this is basically the journey that we've actually had as part of the project. We had a very sizable research. We had researchers on board our team. We did a lot of research, in-depth interviews with residents who participated over a period of time. And this was kind of the common journey that they had been experiencing, this feeling of welcome, being included and accepted, making friends, building trust, being active, learning, feeling excited, being creative, growing in confidence, feeling happy and optimistic. And for so many people to consistently describe this very similar journey really helped us to see that we were getting some of those things right. And we've got reports that you can read with case studies, but one of the most touching things was a resident saying that there was no other space that they'd ever walked into where people were actually wanting to talk to them, about what their dreams are, what their skills are, what they love to do, that all the other spaces that they come into are either trying to sell them something, so all the commercial spaces that we have. We were also cited in a book, by the way, called What Happens When the World Stops Shopping, and it's actually just pointing out even further that we are very poor in the way that we have shared space. We've lost some of those common spaces where people can come together. The other thing was that, just thinking, very slick, I'm sure. I'm going to skip that one. So one of the other things that we had during the project was that we were all the publications that we put out, all the newspapers, was showing bright, colourful activity with people enjoying themselves. And I think that there began to be some narrative with some of the councillors we worked with who saw it as something with happy people doing happy things together. And they were like, what about the people that, are struggling? How do we reach those? And the truth is that these were people who were participating. These were exactly the same people. They had caring responsibilities. They had families with young children. They were unemployed. We had retirees, people recovering from mental illness, addiction, and social isolation. So all of those things, those were people who were participating. And every time that I personally spent time in the shop, which I absolutely love to do. Oh, by the way, we had those spaces, sorry, I forgot to mention there. We had 5 high street shops, which act as this co-creation hubs across the borough. But every time I personally sat in any of those spaces, I'm just looking at the timer now. Is it going up? Am I getting more time, do you think? Am I speaking so well? Is that how it works in Norway? If you're entertaining, they keep adding a few minutes on. That's so nice. Oh, see, you say 5 and this says 7. It's amazing. Where was I? Oh, yes, when you sit in a shop, there hasn't been a single time where I haven't sat with a resident who might have come in for the first time, a gentleman, older gentleman, who said very quickly that he was experiencing loneliness, and 10 minutes later, he was saying that he had 3 apple trees in his back garden and could we do something with those. Or someone who confides in you that they might have attempted suicide and have suffered depression all their lives, and 10 minutes later, they're bringing in some of the woodwork that they do. And so even when people are in a difficult situation, another lady who her mother had she'd been a carer to her mother, she'd had a breakdown, she'd been unemployed for up to 10 years, and she said 10 minutes later, but I know how to do budgets. Can I do a session that helps families do budgeting? So I think it's really brought home to me how we aren't just a bundle of needs. We all have needs, different needs all the way through our lives. We need services, but we all have something creative to give. And I think that can really be that special something which helps to co-create our neighbourhoods in a very different way than they're organised at the moment. So this is a picture from the same project that Jeff was describing. I'm going to argue with him slightly here. This is in Toronto, and I think that we're actually very good at painting this future, particularly architects. Are there any architects in the audience today? Nobody's admitting to it. Does that mean you're all architects? But we are actually quite good at this. In lots of ways. This is another one that really captivates me. You see the sheep and the others outside. I call it the cabbages and babies approach, where everything is just wonderful and gooey. I mean, even the plants look, have you ever grown vegetables? They don't look like that, do they? So I think that we can visualize it, but actually it's the nuts and bolts of how we do it. which is difficult but also amazing. And I think I'm thrilled to be here to tell you that, that we have found a way of making it work. You're probably wondering what I'm going to do with it now. And I've been asking the same question of myself. I stepped down as CEO about 18 months ago, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about, we've invented this amazing thing. The world is distracted and doing other things. How can we use this? And what big problem will this solve? And I think that I've come to the conclusion that the thing that this approach does uniquely and very effectively is bring diverse communities together. And that is something that we really need. The World Health Organization cited that one of the most extreme risks out of the top 10, number 4, is social cohesion erosion. And the first 3 were all related to climate. So this is a really, really big problem, and the solution is beautiful and amazing. I'm also inspired by this project. This is by the Regeneration Foundation, which I only found out about recently, but they invest in bioregion regeneration, and they invest for 20 years for a minimum of 100,000 hectares, and they give $1 billion to each project. And I think this is the kind of scale that we need for social cohesion. We have climate migration coming, and we need to be ready for it. And I think finding a way for diverse communities to live together in the way that I've described is just one of those ways. And I'm hoping that we can make some of that magic happen. I've got 3 minutes. Do I have to fill them in? Should I start on my stand-up routine? Thank you. Oh, yeah.